Hey everybody, Vince Giordano, Juniata County Library. Ask us anything. The question we have today is, what is my favorite book? I couldn't come up with one book, so I broke it down into four categories, different groups of books. The first category is books that really were appealing to me at a period in life, but maybe don't appeal to me today. Maybe my interests and tastes have changed. I really enjoyed Freakonomics and all the offshoots, the podcast. Really clever, really interesting reads. When I was a teacher, I really enjoyed reading all of Jonathan Kozol's books. And I was really interested for a good stretch of time on anti-racism and justice, and I read all Tim Wise's books and saw him speak. Over the last several years, I made a switch and I read a lot more fiction. This book by Amy Waldman is really interesting. It kind of questions a lot of the ideas that we had that kind of came into our mind after 9/11 that had to do with the way we view people. Check this book out. Had to include this series. A lot of detail, great show, but a great book series. And I had to include Michael Connelly as well. Great movie version of this too. This next group of books are books that really stood out to me over the last year or so. Ryan Holiday is a really good author. He has a really good newsletter, and this book especially was really interesting. I was captivated by this book. Just the detail and the history of libraries, and it just had me questioning every step of the way. This was a great book. And then recently, within the past month or so, I read this one. It's an odd book, but it really makes you think about what goes on in a courtroom. Now, these are books here coming up that are my all-time favorites. The whole series by Robert Caro that's still being written are one of my all-time favorites. I went through and read these books, and it made it hard for me to read any other book because of how much detail he had. I felt like other books that weren't as detailed were sparing, and this is a great series, but it's very long. This was one of my first books that was really a favorite. As someone who lives in Pennsylvania, it just was horrifying reading about what happened in Johnstown after each flood. This was a very good book. And speaking of nonfiction that kind of reads like fiction, another book here, really well-written book, really feels like it puts you in the space of where the stories are taking place. And this book here, I would say this is where the movie is better than the book, but the book is still a great book. Ordinary People, great story, heartbreaking. And probably my all-time favorite book is The Power Broker. It's a very long book. I think it clocks in at about 1,200 pages. A man, Robert Moses, who was never elected to any office in the state of New York, but built practically every bridge, park, beach, highway, you name it. Again, Robert Caro, the same person who wrote the Lyndon Johnson books. A great author. So those are some of my favorite books. Continue to ask questions, and I'll continue to answer them, and I hope you're doing well. And thanks for watching.